No. So anyway, hi, Dave Temkin again, Chair of the Election Committee. We're going to go through a series of questions with the candidates. All of these questions came from our community members. Some of them are verbatim, some of them are concatenated versions of multiple questions that were all thematically similar. What we're going to do is each candidate is going to have 3 minutes to give an introduction. They should tell you who they are, why they want to serve on the Nanog board, and whatever else they want to tell you in that 3 minutes. I'm going to run through a series of 5 questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer those questions. I'm not rude, well maybe I am, but I'm not purposely trying to be rude. I will be keeping them to time on those questions because we really don't have a lot of time, and we have, as you can see, a lot of candidates. So, with that, I would like to invite Paul to kick it off.
That's what happens when I sit in the middle. So just a couple notes. Obviously, I know who I am. I'm Paul Emmons, and right now I serve as the executive director for Ninja IX, and we operate 5 community-based internet exchanges here in the United States. I got started in this business when I was about 15 years old. Well, not this business, but in telecommunications. Basically, I started putting in phone systems for friends and relatives, and that kind of morphed into long-distance business. And then I graduated high school, so I had to find something else to do, and ended up in both the resale and the facilities-based long-distance industry for a number of years. And I had an operation in Arizona and California and did consulting for folks in Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and throughout the US. And about that time, something called the internet came along, and I remember the first day we got our 56 kilobit circuit from CRL along with a $5,000 or $6,000 a month bill. And we basically started using it for email and fun things like Gopher. And ever since then, been in and out of, as an entrepreneur, different businesses, basically doing with operating internet networks. And that's also gotten into the paging and cellular and fixed wireless parts of the business. So my background the last couple of years is focused on the IX communities and also on the fixed wireless portions of operations. And I feel that coming in here as a board candidate, I can offer a different point of view than the CDN and some of the larger corporate networks, because pretty much everyone I've worked for has been a small or a new entrant coming into the business, so I'm used to being an entrepreneur and a guerrilla. So with that, I love your support, and I enjoy helping out the community. I guess one other thing would be, I was also the program director for the education committee, and I come from, my parents are teachers, my grandparents are teachers, my sister's a teacher, and that's always something that I've enjoyed with the community, helping learn and expose people to new technologies and new techniques. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve Feldman.
Hi. I'm Steve Feldman, currently employed by CBS Interactive. I'm also on chair of the ad hoc committee for Nanog on the road, currently. I've been around Nanog since the beginning, Nanog number 1. I'm reading from notes here, so excuse me for that. I missed some aspects of the original 50-person meetings that we had in a university environment. But I've also been thrilled to see the growth and expansion of our industry and of Nanog over the years since then. I want to see us continue to thrive, but I also don't want to see us lose focus on the original educational mission that we had. We need to have balance going forward as we have in the past. Yeah, sorry for the reading this. We've done really well financially since becoming independent in 2011, I think it was. We need to continue to ensure that we have sufficient reserves to weather a downturn, which I think we need to assume is inevitable. We can be happy if it doesn't happen, but if it does, we want to be prepared. But we also need to be able to continue investing in programs, educational outreach, things like that, without breaking the bank. The other thing I wanted to mention was if you look at the current composition of the board, we have 2 leaving this year, 2 more leaving next year. I think they're termed out, and then 1 the following year. We're also going to have a new executive director in the near future. So I think it's important that somebody, there'll be someone with history with the organization who remembers the past, and that will help complement a board of new people who can help us move toward the future. So thank you for listening. I hope you will vote for me, but even if not, please consider who the candidates are and who you think will work together to help move Nanog forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Susan Forney.
I'm Susan Forney, and I'm currently employed by the Markley Group, where I am or I lead the network engineering team. I'm a network engineer, and I've worked for the Boeing company and Microsoft before coming to the Markley Group. I was at Microsoft for about 15 years. I didn't really have any prepared remarks because I didn't want to have to try and read them up here with my glasses on. So I decided I'd just treat it like you'd been woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the network's broken, go. So basically, what I would like to do for Nanog is continue to create the type of community it has provided. It's unique in its mission for being able to be a forum and a community for all of the network professionals in North America, and also we reach out to our internationals. I would like to see us continue to grow and develop and maintain that, because there really isn't anything else like that. I started coming to Nanog, I think it was like Nanog 25, so it's been a long time ago, and I haven't attended every single one ever since then, but I thought that Nanog was a very important organization, and it was really critical to the industry to be able to maintain this, level of community and communication and figuring out what we're going to do with the internet as an industry, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that drive it and we're the ones that build it. So if I'm elected to the board, besides making the espresso line shorter, I would like to focus on just creating the type of organization that speaks to the membership and keeps Nanog moving forward and keeps it growing and keeps it vital in the future as well as it has been in the past.
Thank you, Susan. We'll address the espresso thing later if we have time. Eve.
Thanks, David. Hi, I'm Eve Grillikis from Cisco Systems. I work in the optical BU doing product marketing. I am not a network engineer, and I think for that reason I bring a bit of diversity to the board. But I really believe that diversity is not just about gender or race. Diversity is really how you solve problems and how you work with people to solve problems. I think overall it's working with different people and understanding what they're doing is really important. And this is a really special group of people here at Nanog. I mean, everybody here loves to solve problems, so we're all in this together. So let me give you examples of diversity in the sense of where I've been, because I don't expect everyone to read bios. I was an industry analyst for 9 years, so I got to work with a lot of telecom companies. I got to hear their whole pitches, a lot of the bullshit that they deal out, and so I understand sort of, the whole cycle of what's going on there, and I can address that if there's anybody that has questions on this. But overall, there's a lot of things that can be done there, and you have to understand that like a company in Alabama is going to address their vision very differently than a startup, say, in Israel. And so how people solve those problems are really very different, and I'm pretty good at being flexible and working with different types of communities over that. I've also worked over 10 years as a product line manager in routing and switching, Bay Networks, Wellfleet, Nortel, and some optical startups, and obviously optical and Cisco right now. I really work in a very hub and spoke type of way. So I gather information, I pull it in, I do a lot of research on it, I analyze it, and then sort of disseminate it. So that's really the way that I sort of work. So the real question is, what skills do I bring to the board, which is really important. One is the ability to listen. I really like to listen to the kernels of problems and work on those and research them and then figure out what we can really do about that. So that's really one thing that I really liked. I solved a huge problem in one of my first companies, Thinking Machines, if you remember them. It was first parallel processing computer company. And I listened to everybody there, and the answers were out there, believe it or not. It was just that I had to go through and research it and go through the process of proving everything else until we found the solution and then enabled it. So it's a pretty cool thing to do.
Unfortunately, you're out of time.
No!
If we can make this thing stop.
Okay, just one last thing. I have a lot of experience on OSA and committees.
Sean.
Thank you, Dave. So my name is Sean Kennedy. I'm a network engineer, a manager, and I'm a longtime attendee, but what I think is more important is more recent experiences with Nanog. And I took some time off while Merritt was managing Nanog, and that was valuable. And when I came back, it was largely for work purposes, but I've gotten involved and become more engaged for more personal motivations. And so the first one is I've continued to meet new people, learn new ideas. Even this weekend with the hackathon, with the tutorial, I picked up new ideas from Brandon Bennett, listening to him explaining Go and some of the ideas of what he had implemented as far as a BGP controller. Secondly, with the Nanog membership taking over the organization, I feel a sense of ownership, and that drove me to volunteer for the organization. I actually was nominated for the board of directors a while back and didn't feel that I had the qualifications, so I volunteered for the program committee. And I've solicited ideas, new content for the program. I helped grow Nanog on the road and was one of the people that helped bring the hackathons to the program. And I think that's been valuable not only in increasing the content and valuable to the paying attendees, but also growing our community and making it more diverse. Secondly, as a committee leader, I've listened to the members and tried to be their funnel to the board. And a couple of things to mention, the meeting maker that was launched at this meeting and what became the Women in Technologies lunch are the product of ideas from one of the program committee members. And so while I can't take credit for her ideas, I listened when she proposed them, discussed them with her, and made sure the board heard them and the board acted. So I'll be that type of leader if you elect me to the board. Secondly, I think engagement of the membership is extremely important. We can address some of the issues and challenges that are facing simply by doing that outreach, doing that engagement, whether it's to speakers, committee members, new attendees, students, so on. But there may be things that are outside the expertise, or maybe from the inside we can't see them. And so I'll talk with the board about, are there things happening in the community, or the things that the members are raising that we should seek outside help, whether it's culture, whether it's diversity, whether it's growth of the organization. Another thing is to make the organization more diverse. Something important is to encourage the good people that we have in this community to participate, show them the value, that instead of taking their spare time and spending it on a CCIE lab, they could volunteer for Nanog, they could speak at Nanog, and they could be on this panel of distinguished people for the board. So there are a lot of good candidates up here. I would appreciate your vote, but please choose wisely. Thank you.
Tina.
Hi, I'm Tina Morris. I've been in this industry for quite a few years now, starting in the Navy, going through small operators, and then cable ISPs, and now at Amazon Web Services, where I manage strategic planning for IPv4 and IPv6 deployments across the entire Amazon organization. I started coming to Nanogs about 9 years ago, actually as part of, just because they were co-located with Aaron meetings, which I was going to for the IP resources. Found more than I expected at Nanog, found a sense of community, training, networking that's been incredibly valuable. I would like a chance to give back to the organization a bit of what I've received from it. And I feel that I have always had unique roles where I've had to build consensus and manage people that do not actually report to me and get things done in organizations in ways that are not traditional. And those skills can kind of be valuable here. I currently also serve on the Aaron Advisory Council. I've been doing that for 4 years. The vice chair at this point in time. I serve on the fellowship committee, trying to bring new membership in, which is something that Nanog also needs, bringing new and diverse people from different communities, different points of view, and not only bringing them in for their first meeting, but keeping them coming back through maybe continuing education and different opportunities that would be good for the community. Also helping people justify attendance at the meeting. The program committee can't always get the agenda out in time, but maybe trainings and pre-written letters and things like that of justification to help people get to the meetings, so that we can encourage newcomers to become members and just grow the community and increase the networking. So I would love your vote, and I'd love a chance to serve on the board.
Thank you, Tina. Ron Ripley.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Ron Ripley. I am Canadian, likely the only one here. I am currently the manager of an IP and optical networking engineering team at Shaw Communications in Calgary. Shaw is Canada's largest cable operator, or second largest cable operator, with approximately 2.5 million subscribers that stretch from Thunder Bay, Ontario to Victoria, British Columbia. That in itself is a challenge in terms of optical networking and diversity in terms of routing. My team provides engineering and architecture solutions for a production international network and the internet backbone and our optical network, including peering, transit, backbone, and enabling services such as content delivery networks, IP video, voice, and mobility. In addition, we architect and operate multiple data centers that exist across Canada for non-customer facing applications, as well as our content delivery networks. My team continues to innovate and effectively scale large national networks to accommodate rapid subscriber growth while being mindful of spending the capital that we're given and operating costs. I've been in the industry for about 23 years, starting with the birth of Canada's second largest internet backbone. I work to provide design, engineering, operations, and long-term strategy for its evolution. I've spent many years in the vendor community as a systems engineer and a trusted advisor for some of North America's largest telephone companies and cable operators. During that time, I've supported those companies in achieving their business objectives and their technical requirements to maximize their revenue stream and lower their operating expenses, such as building services such as TV, internet, high-speed internet and voice and services like that. I grew up in this field. I've had a passion for networking and jumped right in after high school. So I didn't have the education that was required. So I did go to the San Diego State University and challenged the Bachelor of Science degree and was awarded an equivalency degree in Bachelor of Science for electrical engineering. I've been at Nanog only for about 3 years. I've attended regularly with the exception of one meeting. I've grown to love the community and the networking that makes possible here for me to interact with just about every content delivery company on the planet. As a board member, my goals are to participate in evolving the bylaws that make Nanog the community into membership and drive to an autonomous group, promote education programs through the college immersion programs, and encourage innovative programs such as our hackathons, which are widely exciting. Participate and listen to the Nanog membership, and engage all board meetings. I offer the Canadian spin to some of the challenges that occur in building and operating networks coast to coast, and I look forward to participating on the board if elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there were two other candidates, Paul Fischetti and blanking on the other name. But, sorry? Yes. Neither could be with us. They also didn't submit a statement. So what is on the website is what's the most information that we have on both of them. So what we're going to do is move into the actual Q&A session, as I mentioned. The first question we have was directed specifically at Susan Forney. She was provided it in advance, relating to a couple of people had brought up whether or not there was a potential conflict, given that she works today with board member Patrick Gilmore. So specifically, Susan, a perceived conflict has been identified between yourself and Patrick Gilmore, given you work for the same employer. Patrick is on the board today. Can you clarify your professional relationship and explain whether or not you would consider it an issue to vote against him on a contentious issue related to Nanog?
Okay,
That's a lot of
so
words, sorry.
when I first heard this question, the first thing that went through my mind was, how does anybody think I could work for 3 years with Patrick Gilmore and never have a difference of opinion?
I wish I could comment on that.
And, you know, it is true I've had differences of opinion with Patrick before, but the first thing you should know about my role at Markley is I do not report to Patrick Gilmore. We report up through different managements, and the one-over manager for me is a peer of Patrick, so I don't have like a direct reporting relationship or, you know, have to, you know, fear, you know, what my boss is going to think if I don't agree with him. But I guess the other thing I would say is that, you know, I'm not afraid to make a decision if I think it's the right thing and vote in a certain way or argue for a certain point, you know, whether or not people agree with me, because sometimes you are the only person in the room that's right, and you've got to have the conviction to stand up for that. And then at the end of the day, if you don't get your way or you don't agree, then you have to have enough mutual respect for each other to be able to understand that, you know, that's the decision was made and move on. And I, you know, honestly believe that Patrick is that kind of person, and I can tell you that I am that kind of person too, so I don't see any problem with that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go straight into the next question, which will be posed to everyone on the panel here. What was your, and as I mentioned earlier, you have 1 minute to answer these questions each. What was your most memorable Nanog meeting or moment, and why? Let's start with you again, Susan, if that's okay.
Okay. I think my most memorable Nanog moment was when Doug Wilson joined Microsoft, and he had been in Exo Communications, and we went to the peering booth, and everybody submits a slide to the peering booth so that, you know, they can introduce themselves. And when Doug came up, instead of Doug's slide there, someone put up the blue screen of death and then cued the Star Wars Darth Vader theme. So that was my most memorable moment at Nanog, and it showed me that the internet is a really fun place and made me really want to come back.
Cool. Eve?
Sure. I have to say, not that I participate in the Burning Man event, but the Burning Man presentation was absolutely fascinating. I thought that was really interesting and how they had set up a whole communications system. And I think that something like that for disasters and what we're seeing in Puerto Rico would be really, really helpful to focus on in some of the upcoming Nanogs.
Okay. Sean?
So I'll talk about an experience that was with the Nanog mailing list. And it's a little bit of an old-time insider thing, but it talks about community and so on. And it happens to be Patrick Gilmore. My first introduction to Patrick Gilmore was, I believe he was working for a company, and hosting company, they may have gone out of business. And he didn't have a job, but he offered to find homes for his customers while the power was still on and try to reprovision those within the data center and get them new services. So we went out and said, hey, that's an interesting person. Let's try to bring him in for an interview. And invited Patrick, flew him to BBN. And Patrick showed up and said, the first thing I want to tell you is I don't plan to work for you, but you offered to bring me to Boston, and I couldn't refuse, so I came.
Paul?
Okay. I won't do any Patrick info. Other than the time, last time I think we were in San Francisco where I got appendicitis. We'll skip that one, it's the most exciting. But I just remember like the first Nanog I went to for the full Nanog was in Albuquerque, and I think it was like number 19. And I remember getting there, and those days we started on a Sunday. And basically getting there like 5 minutes before whatever presentation was going to go on. And it might have been a BOF, I don't really quite remember. But I just kind of remember that like during that entire 3 days there in Albuquerque, that I was with people that were excited to learn and be a community together. And like I said, that was the first one I was at the entire time, and since then I've been coming back as often as I can.
Thank you. Tina?
For me, one of the most memorable was a couple of meetings ago when there was that massive DNS outage, and watching everybody come together in the break areas, giving up rooms for people to work that had already checked out of their hotel suites, helping each other, different companies all coming together to get through a very serious network outage that happened during a meeting. And it was really cool to see everybody work together.
Ron?
That was exactly what I was going to say. However, I think the Nanog for me was, I do believe it was again surrounding an outage, which was an elevator issue that kind of, I'm not sure which Nanog that was, but the elevators were out and there was a blue screen on the panels in the elevators. And you know, the other part about Nanog for me was the first one I was at where I got an opportunity to meet some of the people that shaped the way that content is delivered around this country, and it was, you know, one of those aha moments, and finally figured out how to deal with some of these large content providers.
Steve?
A couple, but for me, my favorite, I think, was way back in the early days. I was working for MFS, and one of my primary jobs was to get up in front of Nanog audiences and apologize. So one of those meetings, I decided I was going to wear a target. So I had a target printed up and wore it on my shirt. And while I was speaking, Sean Doran was pointing a laser pointer at the target. And what struck home was at that point we were a community, and as long as we worked together to solve problems, didn't try lying to each other or waving away issues, we could actually, as a community, work together to make things better.
Thank you. All right, you guys are doing great on time, so keep it up. All right, the next question is, this one you might actually need your full minute for. If elected, what kind of programs would you work on to address diversity and inclusion within our community? And if you have the time, can you articulate any specific programs or initiatives that you've worked on to expand diversity within another organization? We'll work backwards from Steve.
I actually have to apologize because I was being whispered at during the very beginning of your question, so could you repeat it?
Okay, you reread the question? All right, so if elected, what kind of programs would you work on to address diversity and inclusion within our community? And can you articulate any specific programs or initiatives that you've worked on to expand diversity within another organization?
Okay, fair enough. So if you look around the room, you'll see that most of us look a lot like me with gray hair and gray beards, and we need to fix that, no question. I think we can solve that to an extent by recruiting volunteers from the broader community, but I think where we really have to go is the pipeline inbound, and that is finding students, finding young engineers who can come into the organization and breathe new life into it. And I'm not talking about just gender or just race or anything like that. It's a whole breadth of different backgrounds that we need more of coming into the organization that will help us around at it in the future.
So I think the biggest important one for me is women in technology. And I look around the building that I work in, and I count 5 women that work in an engineering building of about 1,100 people. And I've worked closely with the universities in Calgary and making sure that from a co-op student perspective that we bring not only women but people of all diverse backgrounds, mostly on their merit of engineering and their desire to want to be in this industry. And we promote not only women in technology but just about everybody that wants to get a hold of this technology and move it forward.
Tina?
So Diversity is obviously important. I've always been in a male-dominated field. It's always been a challenge. I've served on the Women in Cable Board of Directors for Florida when I was a part of the cable industry. And one of the focuses was, just bringing more women into tech. Obviously, diversity is also small operators, other parts of the industry, there's so many things that it covers. But this is an intimidating organization. Whether we want to be welcoming or not, it doesn't always come across that way. So I think more investment in mentorship programs and ways to give people access and feel a way to start out for newcomers, more trainings, more starter one-on-one courses or one-on-one courses, and offer ways for people to become part of the community in a less intimidating format would be helpful.
Paul?
I think that by utilizing the Nanog on the Road program and also maybe looking at additional educational opportunities is a good way to bring in other ethnicities and women into our community in a manner that's, like Tina said, not 1,300 people large, and where you can spend a lot more one-on-one time with those people as well. Like on the roads, there's no cost for that. And so it's a lot easier to get employers to allow people to go to those events. And so I see that as a way that we can help bring in both more women and and other people in operations into this organization.
Sean?
So, I think our culture today is important, and it's welcoming but intimidating, and there's very much a place for a lot that happens. Some of the geek humor and presentations and so on. We let our engineers present things that they wouldn't go and present at PTC, that you wouldn't talk about with your manager in a review meeting and so on. So that's important, as are the socials, but we do have to engage other members of the community, and we may need help from outside. So as far as experience with diversity, I was one of the founding board members of the Brazilian Women's Group, which obviously I'm not a Brazilian woman. But they had to go outside their organization to look at how to structure their meetings, how to structure their outreach to the community, and so on. So I think there's a lot of value in what we do today, and there's some changes that we may need to make. So first of all, the board has to engage the membership and not just on mailing lists. We can't have a constructive discussion.
Unfortunately, you're
always
out of
on
time.
mailing lists.
Close your thought.
Sure. I'm welcome to ideas, and I'd love to talk about this further. And I think the members' breakfast is the right place for members to talk to the board about it.
Thanks, Sean.
I came up with an idea a couple of days ago, and maybe I'm sure somebody else has done this before, but I was thinking it would be really cool to go to some of the sponsors at Nanog and ask them for $10,000 or $15,000 each, especially the big routing guys who have a lot of money, and put that towards scholarships for people to come and tend to Nanog. Because I think with everything in this industry, you have to start really young, and we have to start training people really young. The number of women that are in computer science classes, actually according to Melissa Gates, was about 25% when she was in college, and it's actually down to about 15% now. So we have to get women in colleges much more involved now, and I'd like to see scholarships going that way. And I think it's certainly possible. This is the type of thing that I think I'm really good at, is getting people to donate money and figure out a good scholarship program. I also think that, and I've mentioned this a couple times before, but there was a Harvard Business School study that showed that women often drop out of tech because they're not properly mentored. I have to tell you, a lot of women don't...
I have to cut you off, but just to be fair
Okay.
to everyone else.
Don't want to be mentored by women. They want to be mentored by men.
Susan?
I have, like the other people on the board, or candidates here, I think that it's not just about including women, it's about including other ethnicities, because, it's a large community, and you have to make everybody feel welcome. And I think that's really important. I think that, making people feel part of the community and encouraging them to come back and encouraging them to express their thoughts and to be respectful when people are trying to do that is the kind of thing that helps us encourage that diversity and encourage that thought to come forward so that we have that. As far as things that I've done for diversity, when I was at Microsoft, I developed a program called Mentor Rings, where I figured out a way to get director-level women in touch with other women, lower-level women in a mentoring program so that they would have access to them, because the directors didn't have time to mentor these women individually. So by creating these groups and setting this up, I expanded the amount of women who could get mentorship in that company. And as Eve was saying, it's really important to have, and some of my mentors in that program were men. There weren't very many of
Susan,
them, but some of them
I'm going to cut you off, but thank you. Next question, and we'll go back the other way if that's okay with everyone. There's been some chatter on the mailing list about the community being a turnoff to new members. Some might say that it's cliquey. Do you agree with this? Loaded question, I guess. And if so, what would you do as a new board member to attempt to change this perception? Susan, let's start with you. That's okay.
Okay, so actually, I kind of think it is. I think that I was very lucky when I started coming to Nanog because I came with people like, Matt Petak and Doug Wilson, who knew everybody and introduced me and helped integrate me into the community. And I do that today. I try to sit at tables where, even before I'm running for board member, every Nanog I go to, I try to sit at tables where I don't know anybody, and I try to talk to people about what they do, and I try to tell them what Nanog is if they're newcomers, and try to encourage the community to get bigger, and try to encourage them to come back and participate. And I think one person makes a difference, and I think that's a really great way to do it.
Look, people get cliquey. It's a natural side effect of behavioral psychology. The fact of the matter is, I think you're right. Jimmy Albin and Dougie, if you sit at a table with either of them, will introduce you to practically everybody in this organization. And I found an overwhelming warmth and wonderfulness amongst everybody here. I continue to come back, to every Nanog and see everybody and feel like I can talk to everybody about anything and learn from this community. I have learned so much. I just learned a whole bunch of stuff from Dougie this morning about DDoS attacks, so it's amazing.
Sean?
So we have a fairly large community, particularly in the general session and on the mailing list, and there's some strong voices. But one of the ways to address that is to provide other forums that sort of split up the groups, such as Paul mentioned Nanog on the Road. We've had a lot of those, and those are smaller forums, and they welcome newer members. The newcomer lunch obviously does that. The hackathons, I think, have been a big help. You bring people with different experiences and expertise and let them run wild there, basically. And then the last thing is just the membership themselves can change this culture. I mean, we own Nanog. It's a membership organization. So step out of your cliques, welcome newcomers. Don't just wait for the board to mentor. Mentor new people, mentor newcomers, get people to join the committees.
Paul?
We have a hard time coming with something original, but yes, it's cliquey, and I think I once a year try to bring at least one of my clients who's never been to a Nanog and try to introduce them to as many people. And honestly, they just feel overwhelmed a lot of times. And I think whatever we can do to help the new people coming in feel more welcome, whether it's more breakout type of sessions, might be a little bit more helpful. But I think it's really just everybody in the organization trying to make the newcomers feel welcome. I think that would go very far.
Tina?
Yes, as you said, most things have been said already, but yes, it is cliquey. It's also, there's business meetings going on in the hallways, so sometimes you approach somebody and they're in the middle of a discussion and you feel as though you were shunned when it was just the bad timing. So as a whole, we should all make a point to find those people again and have that conversation later so they don't feel put off. I think a formal mentorship program for newcomers would be a very valuable asset, and to take it seriously and make sure that that person meets at least 10 new people at the meeting that they're comfortable with approaching at the next meeting. And then your circle just gets larger and larger each time. But if we don't actively involve these newcomers, they're not going to make those relationships that make this a warm and welcoming environment.
Ron?
Completely agree. I think the formal mentorship program is something that we at my organization do on a regular basis, and bring new people in and give them somebody or a group of people that can specifically mentor those in the area of their expertise. So a formal mentorship program, we need to step out of our comfort zone as being members and go out of our way to help members that are not there or on the fence of becoming a member, and help bring them by helping mentor everybody. I think that's it is cliquey, but it is also, there's a way out of it with a mentorship program. I agree with that.
I'm not going to disagree with anything anybody said. I'm a registered introvert, so it's hard for me sometimes to get out and do what I need to do to meet people. One idea that Paul briefly mentioned, which I think might help a lot, is expanding the breakout sessions back to where it was a few years ago, where we had BOFs for different subjects. Right now we sort of have peering and everything else. I'd like to see more specialized areas in breakouts where smaller groups can get together and talk about things in a somewhat less formal manner.
Okay. Somewhat thematically on that, stop my timer here. Several long-standing community members, also commonly known as graybeards, have expressed discontent, they refer to themselves as a graybeard in the question, with the present direction of Nanog, arguing it has become a trade show. How do you perceive the direction of Nanog, and what, if anything, needs to change under your tenure? And we'll come back the other way so that you don't have to use the unoriginal answer, Steve.
That's fine. And I noticed you give to the graybeard first.
That was not on purpose.
So they have an absolute point. Excuse me. I think I have seen the evolution of Nanog from, like I said, it was 50 people in a university auditorium to 1,300 people here today. I think there is danger of us becoming too much of a trade show and not enough of a conference anymore. We haven't crossed that line, and I think we're a ways away from it. But I think if we're not careful, at some point we're going to cross it without realizing it, and it'll be really hard to go back. And I think there are things we can do, like expanding educational outreach types of things on the roads, my previous BOF idea, to help alleviate some of that and get back to probably the right mixture of commercialism versus learning about stuff in the ballroom.
I agree. I think 90% of this should be about people bringing their ideas forward in a environment that's welcoming to them. 10% probably, or even less, should be about the vendor space and the vendor communities trying to sell you something every day. I get at least 4 of those every couple hours in the morning here for me. I think there's a forum to have in this room. We host a vendor night here at least once at Nanog, which is probably sufficient for the vendors to come and show their things. But we do need to make sure that we're not getting into that trade show space, and that's probably I think closer than Steve might think.
Tina?
Overall, I really appreciate the way vendors have been kept out of presentations and advertisement in this room and things to that effect. However, my email has definitely increased on people trying to sell me things affiliated with my registration at Nanog. So I think it's a tricky balance. You need sponsorship, but you also need attendees to be here for education and things like that. So I think as long as we continue to put our focus towards education, bringing new people in, young people in, and keep the focus there and keep it away from, the intention is to grow new quality members, the future of our industry, our companies, but not so much money and attendance just for the sake of attendance.
Paul?
The last 2 Nanogs or so, I've just felt like I'm coming for meetings outside of the room because everyone wants to have a 15 or 30-minute meeting. So this time, I purposely said, I'll meet with you anytime on Sunday. or I'll meet with you anytime in the evenings, but I really don't want to be pulled away from the actual conference. And in my case, I'm paying for the conference myself, and so, you know, if there's a session that I'm not particularly interested in, let's say, I don't need to go. There's no one over giving me oversight, asking me to go, essentially. So I can still kind of make my own schedule. And so I've kind of felt, like I said, I've kind of felt torn recently because I've got customers or operators that are wanting to schedule meetings, and I'd really like to kind of see, you know, maybe an encouragement to try to do some of that stuff, you know, away from the conference time. And I know that can be really hard to do, but I got someone who I've been trying to get a hold of and set up a meeting with for a couple months now, and the time that they wanted to have a meeting is right now.
Thanks, Paul. Sean?
So, I mean, there's always been people pushing their ideas at regional techs and Nanog and so on. And I mean, some of the motivations that you come are not just about the technology. When I first came to regional techs, I wanted new code from Tony Lee for my router. I wanted to know why the NetEdge at May East was shredding my ATM packets, or ATM was shredding my packets, and so on. But today there's a lot of good content. I wish we could keep the people that have the experience around more and let them meet newcomers. So an example, Vince Cerf came and spoke in Washington, and one great moment in Nanog, he jumped up in the middle of somebody's presentation, walked up to the podium, and instead of asking his question from the microphone, he asked it at the podium. And the presenter was a little surprised, but actually enjoyed it. And then Vint gave his talk, and afterwards he stood around and took selfies with the graduate students that were part of the NCI environment. So I wish that, for instance, Jack Waters, that was here today, could have stayed longer, and other people from the industry to meet some of the newcomers. And we could facilitate that perhaps with additional lunches and breakouts.
Thanks, Sean.
I think the program committee has done a great job of keeping a lot of the vendor stuff out of the basic subject matter for most of the Nanogs. I really do. I do not want to see this turn into a trade show by any means. The intimacy here, the ability to talk very freely about what we're doing in the networks is, I think, priceless. So I would not like to see that changed. As Tina said, it's a fine balance between getting the money from the sponsors and straight arming them a little bit. I feel very comfortable if I got on the board that I'm very good at straight arming and yet getting money out of them.
Susan?
I pretty much agree with what everyone else has said here. I think it's really important to maintain Nanog as the community of people who run the internet. A really good example of why that's important is when the initial arguments and debates about net neutrality were going on, and we actually had the people from the government here, the FCC here, talking about that stuff and listening to our opinions, and actually making a difference in how things work. And if Nanog doesn't maintain that posture, then it's going to become ineffective, and we're going to lose a really important, valuable tool. So, like everybody else, I would like to preserve that.
Cool. All right, so now this is the last question. I'm going to give you 75 seconds each because we've got a little bit of time. And it's a three-parter. Well, three-parter for you. One question in 18 parts. No. So what do you feel are the top 3 priorities that the Nanog organization needs to focus on over the course of the next few years, and how would your experience or skill set contribute to successfully executing on those priorities? You can choose if you want to answer 3 or 1 or 2 or 10. Anyway, so we'll go back the other way, starting with you again, Susan.
Okay, I think that, pretty much we've talked about most of the things that I would like to focus on, and that is just, continuing with the building of the community, continuing to keep the Nanog focus being on, people who are in networks and the industry and what it does best, and trying to reach out a little bit more to engage new members and, like they said before, maybe have a little bit more of a younger population and engage the people who are going to build the networks tomorrow and want them to be a part of this community too. Those are the things I would like to, focus on if I'm here. I have a long history of, just doing that kind of thing on my own. I work on those things, especially for the outreach when I come to the meetings, and I would continue to do that as a board member and try to organize events so that we could be more effective at that.
Eve.
I think that Nanog is at a little bit of a crossroads right now, and I think it's probably really important to get a lot of feedback from the general public, and I think it's really important that the public feels comfortable and not intimidated to talk about what it is that's important to them. So I would try to have a less intimidating atmosphere and do all the things that we've talked about, not have it be a trade show, reach out to many more people and a diverser group of people, and keep it the essence of what Nanog is as Nanog.
Thank you. Sean?
So Nanog is incorporated as a membership organization with an educational purpose. So first of all, maintaining the independence of the program committee, so the board shouldn't interfere in the program committee. They do appoint the members of that, but then they let the committee self-organize, solicit the content, and so on. So that must continue. That's important, and we must remain an educational organization and not a trade show. Secondly, I think culture and outreach is important, and that's not only maintaining some of the history. Steve talked about our history. I talked a little bit about this being a safe space for engineers and others, and we need to be more inclusive. So that's second important. And lastly, financial. The questions this time have largely been about culture, whereas the last election, it was largely about financial. And today the organization is on solid financial footing. It's making investment of its cash reserves, but we do need to be careful in the initiatives that we take, and so the board should be responsible with the organization's money.
Yeah, I would like to see that our 3-time-a-year meeting, just be the most effective and inclusive as we can possibly do, which doesn't always necessarily work together. But in some of the other things that we've talked about having other like breakout type sessions, I think that would go to a long way for these 3 meetings. But I also see that the education, whether we do an education series or kind of a more formalized or planned out arc of educational programming that can be counted on to occur, that can be planned. And you may not be able to come to this Nanog, but you might be able to come to one next, the summer one or the winter one. But having an actual schedule that can span a course of a couple Nanogs out there, I think would be very, very helpful. And then lastly, like Sean and some others have said, on the Nanog on the road, I see that where we're as the best way for us to get other operators involved. We've got, I believe we do like about 4 or 5 of them a year. I'd like to see more if possible. And the other aspect.
We're on time, Paul. Sorry.
No problem.
Thanks. Tina?
Yeah, as pretty much everybody's saying, is more education, continued education, immersion of new people to the community, bring in the junior network engineers, get them coming, not just the top level people, and just bring that new group of people in. I've done a lot of work with the Aaron Fellowship Committee, trying to get people in from other groups, other communities, the Caribbean specifically for Aaron is a challenge, and just trying to build those relationships and bring people back is an important thing, and that's one of the things I would focus on as a board member.
Ron?
Great, thanks. I think education, as everybody said here, is absolutely critical to the survival. I've taken groups from co-op students from many universities and colleges throughout Canada, and have gone on my way to make sure that these people get an opportunity to understand what this network is and what a network is, because most of them have this aspiration of becoming a network engineer, but when you ask them if they know what a network is, they really can't tell you. So I think helping them understand the fundamentals and the basics of what it is, and helping these people grow through engineering and becoming who we are here today, and those top tier people, the Tony Lees and the Sean Dorans of the world, helping that group get to that point, I think is very key. Thanks.
And then Steve.
So I see two big challenges among the various ones worth mentioning here. The external one is what everyone's been talking about pretty much all the time, is bringing in the newcomers, extending our outreach to things beyond just the conference or trade show or whatever we're calling it, to make sure the new people know about us and want to participate. I can't really add to the great ideas I've heard already today. The other challenge I see is more internal, and that I touched on that briefly in my opening statement, and that is there's going to be quite a bit of turnover fairly soon as board members rotate out, and especially as Betty retires and we hire a new executive director. We need to make sure that that transition is seamless, that we end up not breaking things as we move forward. I believe I'm in a position to help that. With my previous experience on the board, one of my big roles in the past was to act as kind of a facilitator and consensus builder. Even when we disagreed, we could discuss rationally and come up with what we considered to be the right answer for various problems, and that's how we got where we are today. So if you choose to reelect me, then that's what I'll do.
Thanks, Steve. All right, so now we're going to lightning round it. We have about a little more than 15 minutes left. I'd like to invite any community members who want to ask a question. You are free. I would prefer if you asked aimed at the whole panel and not just at any specific person. And I will give everyone 45 seconds to answer that. Patrick?
Patrick Elmore, Markley Group. I'm surprised no one else wants to ask a question. Don't you guys want to know what new board members think about things? All right, so we talked a lot about community and what it means to be Nanog and stuff, and that's very, very important. But as a board member, you have some other responsibilities. Who here has actually read the website where we list off the responsibilities of what a Nanog board member is required to do? All right, all you raised your hands. I'm not sure I believe you. So how about simple question? Could you each list one thing that was on the website?
Wow. Okay, Patrick. We'll start middle out for this one. Just to be fair, we'll start with Paul.
Pretty sure there's something about financial or fiduciary responsibility there. So, which way do you want to go?
I'll go to Sean.
Attending board meetings, attending a minimum of Nanog meetings in person.
Tina? Mike?
All right, those are my two. The acting. I know. No,
I don't
I'm just
know if
trying
there's
to
even
I'm
7 bullet points in
visioning
that,
the
Patrick.
page.
I just wanted to confirm that. All right. Does anyone want to just volunteer one instead of...
I think there was the word home on there somewhere, top left corner. Yes, of course there was
wait, hold on.
attending Nanog meetings at least 2 out of the 3 in the year.
Eve?
I mean, I've read the basic requirements. I thought the division between the PC committee and the board committee was pretty interesting, and that's what I noted.
Anyone else want to add one? Steve?
I'll admit I don't have it memorized, but fiduciary duty is the important one. We have a responsibility as board members to ensure the health of the organization going forward, and not just enrich ourselves in whatever way possible.
Okay. Tony and then Joe. Tony?
Tony Tauber, Comcast. What can people tell me about their experience with, to me, one of the most important things, at least right now, is hiring and guiding the new executive director. So what can you tell me about experience, relevant experience that you have that you can bring to bear?
We'll start with Eve.
I don't have a lot of experience hiring executive directors. I'll be very honest about that. I think I can do a good job interviewing, and I would work with the current board members to help make that decision. But
Let's go to Tina.
Again, I don't have a lot of experience specifically hiring people like that, but I do have experience working with a lot of people in that kind of role and know what my expectations would be, and also kind of shaping the direction of an organization. So I would apply that and hopefully lean on other board members as well to make that decision.
Steve.
Well, I actually do have experience hiring an executive director. I was on the search committee when we hired Betty. A large part of the job is figuring out what you want the executive director to be, what the role should be, and defining it so that when you actually start bringing in candidates, you are measuring the candidate against what you want the person to be. You need somebody who's going to fit with the organization's goals, who's going to complement us rather than work against us. That should go without saying, obviously, but it needs to be done.
We'll go with you, Ron.
Yeah, so again, I don't have a lot of experience in hiring executive management. I do have a lot of experience in hiring network architects and senior principal engineers. But I would defer and work with the rest of the Nanog board to work with what's best for that position.
Susan?
When I was at Microsoft, I participated in hiring a executive level director and general manager type of people. And what Steve is saying about job search in those types of situations is exactly right. If you don't know what you want, you're not going to get it. So you have to figure out what you're going to want first. And then once you consider what it is that you're looking for, then you have to be very careful to make sure that you interview the people and figure out whether or not they have those requirements. And so that's what I would do.
Paul and then Sean.
I've had the experience, I guess, twice of being in an organization and being on the committee to interview new executive directors, and it's not easy, and it wasn't fun. But in one case, we found the perfect person, and I think in the other case, just through the patience of it, we were able to find a really good match as well. So I know going into it that it may not be very easy. It may not be very comfortable, but it's very critical that you get the right person in there.
Sean?
So I think in any hiring situation, you really need to manage the recruiters, provide them with good information, look at the candidates and resumes that they provide you, give them feedback, interview candidates individually as a team, and discuss the results, and then revise the search. This is obviously something we need to complete, so we can't dally doing that, but you do need to be thorough. Secondly, I have worked closely with Betty, and I have a fair amount of operational knowledge of the conferences itself for putting it on, so I think I can help at least with that, and there are still board members with a lot of experience with the financial part of the organization that can help mentor a new executive director. So I'm hopeful we'll find a good candidate and do a good job of mentoring and making that transition smooth.
Thank you, Sean. Joe, you're not? Okay. All right. Matt.
Matt Petak, Yahoo. So at a not too long ago Nanog member breakfast, a bit of a bombshell was dropped about a increase in the fee structure without a whole lot of warning. Now, as potential board members, in theory, you're answerable to the membership and the community here. What are you going to propose to do to make sure that the lines of communication between the board and the membership of the community stay open and clear so that when decisions like that are being made, the community is aware of it coming ahead of time and has a chance to provide input more than just pass the microphone around over the bacon after the decision's already been made? Thank you.
Okay, so so we can get through the last question in 30 seconds on this one. Start with it's Tina.
I believe any proposed fee structure changes should be circulated to the community well in advance of the actual vote to move them forward. And I think that's the most transparent possible way to do it, and the logic behind it should be shared as well.
Sean?
So, I mean, I think obviously I've mentioned the members' breakfast, and because it's breakfast, I mean, bacon's been a draw for getting the members there on time, but a lot of the discussion sometimes resolves around that and ancillary issues, and we obviously do have a financial responsibility and need to communicate that, but the board needs to find ways to talk to the community And it's in that room at breakfast. It's outside that room engaging members of the community. But you do have to make a decision. So communicate what you're working on, discuss it thoroughly, document the minutes, and make the decision. And obviously, Nanog had the same fee for many years, so it perhaps was not unreasonable, just there may have been a better way to address raising the fees.
Thanks, Sean. Steve.
Yeah, I think that decision could have been communicated differently and with more advanced warning and not over a breakfast. There are certainly some things that the board's going to have to do where you just make the decision and do it, like hiring an executive director, perhaps. But fee structure, it shouldn't be one of those. There should have been advanced discussion so that it didn't come as a shock to people, and it should have been announced more in advance, I think.
You're up on time. Sorry. I started it 2 seconds late. So. Ron.
I think that it definitely needed to be communicated in multiple ways. One of them is a mailing list because, that's just a way to get to mass people. But unfortunately, not everybody reads every single email that they get. So not everyone is going to be aware of that. So we need to do that in conjunction with sending out emailing and making sure that you're also getting that communication done at these breakfasts and well in advance.
Eve?
I think that there are many companies right now that are really clamping back on travel and being very careful how money is being spent. And I think the reality of that is very serious, and I think it may or may not affect the attendance going forward. And so I think we have to be very cognizant of that a lot of us in senior positions can easily travel and don't have to get the OKs, which is partly why I think a sponsorship program that not only pays for travel, but attendance, it would be good.
Susan?
Obviously the fees, the fee issue that ship has sailed. But to prevent stuff like that from happening in the future, probably a really good idea would be just to distribute the things that were going to be discussed at these meetings so that everyone would know and they could, give everybody a chance to approach their board members or email the board and let them know what their opinion was, and then perhaps we could avoid situations like this in the future.
And then I believe finally Paul.
Yeah, I think that having the most amount of notice possible, and like everyone said, having it on the agenda and having a chance to know about it, not at breakfast, but way beforehand, is to me is the only way to operate it with transparency.
Thank you. And then final question.
My name is Rudy Daniel. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm a first-time attendee, so thank you for the opportunity to attend Nanog.
Of course.
The internet being a multi-stakeholder bottom-up governance process, how would you, what specific policies would you promote to ensure that we move on in the development of that bottom-up governance process instead of returning to the hierarchical vertical process that we all are very accustomed to?
We will start with, who went last? Paul.
I think there's things that our community can do with respect to informing government policymakers, but the reality of it is that we're dealing in a world where we have both a content side of the business and the eyeball side of the business. And as IXP operator, I see that all the time. I think that, from the standpoint of different regulations within, certain regions, decreases the availability of the internet to some populations. And I think that there's things that we can do as an organization on an outreach basis to help those communities.
Okay. And by the way, you have 45 seconds to answer this. Steve?
So with the caveat that we're not an internet governance organization, there's others to do that. There are things that we can do to help. We can encourage cooperation and communication between the various stakeholders on a technical basis. And as we saw with some of the FCC stuff, that can actually help inform policy by the people who actually do make it, make things more open and better for everyone.
Ron?
I'm going to just completely agree with what Steve said.
Okay, fair enough. Susan?
Yeah, I think that I think we're all on the same page here, and it's, you know, in order to make this work, we just have to continue to be the organization that, you know, is representative of the internet profession, so that we can, you know, approach people and have an influence and have an impact.
Eve?
I completely agree. I don't have more to add than that. It's
Sean?
So I think growing the knowledge of our members and making that available to policy makers. We had a lunch with the FCC, 3 senior technical members of the FCC working on policy, Office of the CTO, and they came in, talked to our members, told our members how to engage not only the FCC, but other parts of the US government. And out of that, we talked with the FCC, and they said, hey, we mentioned Nanog on the road and that we'd done one in North Virginia, and they said, why don't you bring one to Washington, D.C. for the federal government? So that's something that the program committee has been talking about with Betty for 2018. And lastly, I mean, we give space to community IXs through RIRs like Aaron to come speak and bring issues of internet governance on the program, and I think we should continue that.
Thanks, Sean. Tina?
I believe that when we have situations like this with the FCC and all that, you can invite that community into this community to learn more and build bridges as well. We've done a lot of that in the Aaron community with law enforcement. We've had a lot of problems that have been brought forth, and a lot of engagement with law enforcement has hopefully kept us out of the government interfering with the internet more than they already do. And so anything we could do to help with that is obviously good.
I got everyone, right? Okay. So with that, that's our last question. I want to thank all of our candidates for coming up here and sharing all of their opinions on things. Hopefully it's informed you for who you choose to vote for. I'm assuming they'll be around over the next couple days. I don't think anyone's planning on leaving, but you should find them in the halls if you want to find out more. I apologize again for any of the questions I cut them off for. They might be able to expand on that. But yeah, with that, thank you. After this, you guys can step away if you'd like. After this, for those of you who are in the peering community, there's the Peering Coordination Forum. Sean, I believe that's it, right? That's the only content left tonight before the social. And then the social starts at 7. Is that correct? 7:30? 7. Awesome. Thank you. What? Where is the Peering Coordination Forum?
So the peering... I was going to give a reminder, you put them out of order here. So okay. Regency Ballroom 2, does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
I think that's where the lunch was.
Okay. So Peering Coordination Forum, Regency Ballroom 2 for the next couple hours. After that, the social at 7 at San Pedro Square Market, which I think is just down the road, right?
Yeah, it's walkable. It's less than a 10-minute walk.
Perfect. A couple other reminders before everyone runs. First of all, please fill out the survey. That's how the program committee figures out what works, what doesn't, and how to make this place better. And obviously, it's time to vote. If you are not a member, I'm told that as long as you're a member by 9 a.m. Wednesday, you can vote.
That's correct.
So please do, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.